This is a 2000 Mercedes-Benz E320 4MATIC wagon, and it is one of my favorite wagons of all time. The W210 E-Class, of which this is actually an S210, and I'll get to that in a minute, is excellent in terms of reliability, understated styling, and luxury level comfort, even by today's standards. I've owned this car for over 2 years now, and it's been a great vehicle to have with the family. Today, I'm going to review this E320 and show you why it's such a great car, and of course go over all of its nuances and gadgets. Before I get started though, big news! This E320 wagon is currently for sale on Bring a Trailer. It is offered on Bring a Trailer with no reserve. The auction ends on Tuesday, March 12, 2024, that's today, at 3:25 p.m. Eastern or 12:25 p.m. Pacific. Please note that Bring a Trailer did not sponsor this video, and I am not affiliated with Bring a Trailer other than being a seller on the site. Back to the review. The W210 was Mercedes' internal model code for this version of the E-Class, which was sold from 1996 to 2002. This car is actually not a W210 because it is an S210. In German, for some reason, the W meant sedan and the S meant wagon for internal model designation codes. So the sedan version is the W210, while the wagon version is the S210. Go figure. Now, Mercedes had done a wagon on the previous generation, so customers were expecting the same level of high functionality and performance. Since this car originally sold for over $50,000 in late 1999, which is over $91,000 in 2024, after adjusting for inflation. However, since a brand new 2023 E-Class wagon starts at $71,000 today, and the base model is an E450 with many more features and more horsepower than there was in 2000, it actually makes it a great deal in comparison. Note that most of the dealers have optioned them up to the mid 80K range, so it's not as good of a deal, but it's still a good deal. And also notice that I said 2023 and not 2024 because 2023 was the last model year for the E-Class wagon in the US. It does look, however, like there's still plenty of inventory out there, which kind of leads me to believe that Mercedes pulled the plug due to lack of sales. So I would say to get yours now before they're gone forever. So let's talk a bit about powertrain and performance. Under the hood of this relatively subtle, restrained, mid-size German luxury wagon, you get a 3.2-liter V6 with a respectable 221 horsepower and 232 foot-pounds of torque. Those were decent numbers in 2000 and still not too bad today. Fuel economy is 17 miles per gallon city, 24 miles per gallon highway, which is about on par with a non-hybrid minivan or full-size SUV today with 3 rows. But remember, this wagon also has 3 rows, so that's kind of the competition here. Curb weight is a staggering 3,955 pounds for the 4MATIC all-wheel drive wagon model, and the 0 to 60 time is in the mid 7-second range, which is still not too bad for a large, heavy 3-row vehicle. It's also worth pointing out that this E320 wagon is equipped with 4MATIC, which is Mercedes' brand name for their all-wheel drive system. The wagon was also available in rear-wheel drive without 4MATIC, but many that were delivered to buyers in snowy climates opted for the all-wheel drive version. The only exterior cues that this is the all-wheel drive version is the 4MATIC logo on the rear hatch. It also has a 5-speed automatic transmission, which was kind of a big deal at the time when most cars had a 4-speed automatic. This helped improve both acceleration and performance. Many cars today commonly have 7, 8, even 10-speed transmissions. So there aren't really many exterior nuances of the car, and I think it was styled very nicely for the time period, and it's aged quite well now that it's reaching modern classic status. It seems blocky at first glance, but it actually has very rounded edges, and I love the long roofline of the wagon. Especially compared to the sedan. They have a very conservative design, even for the AMG model, which has no sharp angles or scoops anywhere or wild body kits. Just straight, clean body lines with a subtle curve to it around the edges. It was updated for the 2000 model year. They call this the facelift. One nuanced design element was the headlights. These big round headlights from on the front didn't really fit with the rest of the Mercedes lineup at the time, whereas the previous E-Class had a much more similar design to the C-Class and the S-Class, and the same thing is true today. I think they made this move at the time because car designs were changing rapidly and dramatically, and Mercedes was kind of testing the waters for this more revolutionary design language. It eventually was so popular that they used it on the 203 C-Class, the 209 CLK, and on the next generation of E-Class, the W211, which ran from 2003 to 2009 in the US, before dropping the round lights in 2010 for more of a square look. One interesting exterior gadget is the mono wiper. That's one big wiper for the entire windshield, and it has this cool double hinge type mechanism. It goes across the whole windshield, so no second wiper is needed, but I think that this also probably makes for fewer wiper blade sales in the parts department, and that's why I suspect it was eventually dropped. Next, we go inside the W210, or the S210 E320 wagon, and just getting inside is a luxurious experience. The feel of the door handle, the solidity of the door. Just take a listen. It has a nice thunk to it. Mercedes-Benz is famous for their over-engineered, overbuilt design philosophy from this car's era that had solidity ingrained in it. This is one of the last cars to have that solid feel that Mercedes was known for. Before we go inside, there's actually one very cool gadget on the door itself. There's a little black square on the door handle, and that's an infrared receiver, and the key itself has an infrared transmitter on it instead of a normal key. And if you hold the infrared part of the key to the door and you hold the unlock button, it will move the windows down for you. And then if you get out of the car and the windows are down and you hold the lock button, it will put the windows up for you, all from the outside of the car. A nice way to sort of cool it off in the summer before you get in the car. So moving on to more interior nuances and gadgets, this car has some interesting ones, starting on the door panel where you have the seat controls, and it's shaped like a seat, and that's pretty common in Mercedes-Benz models, but there's also a little triangle that's the steering wheel control, and it's shaped like a steering wheel, and you can move it up and down and forward and back, so you don't have to reach under the steering wheel or anything. And you can still find those seat controls on the modern Mercedes on the door, which is an interesting feature. I don't think any other brands really have that. The other neat feature is that the headrest is motorized, so you move the headrest up and down on the little seat buttons, and that means you don't have to reach behind your head to move it up and down yourself in your luxurious German sedan. The headrest also moves automatically with the seat, so that they're assuming a larger person will want more leg room and a higher headrest setting. Moving beyond the door into the interior, it's not exactly beautiful by today's standards, but it's very functional and it keeps with Mercedes-Benz reputation at the time. There was a navigation option with a screen. This car does not have it, and it would obviously not be very functional by today's standards. There's no Bluetooth or anything like that. However, you can swap the trim piece that this car has with the one that had the screen and put in a double din head unit, which would modernize the interior and make it more functional. And this auction vehicle does come with that double din trim piece. One cool gadget is the hidden tape deck behind the faceplate. You press tape and then eject to open it. The 6-disc CD changer is located in the rear cargo area, and I'll get to that later. Another part of the interior's nuance is that they went with a lot of buttons and switches. Everything is kind of hardwired, and the design and quality of it's very nice. It all lights up at night, which is nice. You know, there's not excessive styling or swoopy lines, but that wasn't their thing. However, as this car approaches 25 years old, everything looks almost like it did from the factory because they were designed to last. as Mercedes did in the era. And you can see it's held up pretty well over the years. Anyway, if you have this many switches, you know that some of them are going to be weird. So going on to the next nuance buttons, there is the climate controls. And you have this button with a white arrow, and it's something going through it, and there's a black arrow and and this is the secondary cabin air filter with activated charcoal. The car actually has two separate cabin filters. One regular, like a normal car has a cabin filter that just filters out particulate matter. And the second one has activated carbon, so it can actually filter out smells. So if there was something particularly smelly outside, or I guess if you have it on recirculate, possibly inside, something smelly, then you could turn on the activated carbon filter. And again, it looks like this white arrow symbolizing the dirty air coming through, and it's clean on the other side. So it was an interesting choice to add to the buttons. Another nuance on the AC is the rest mode. Rest was used for keeping the cabin warm without the car being on. It would turn the climate system back on after you turned the engine off, with the heat available after the car was off. So this was handy for longer road trips. For example, if you stop at a rest stop and you want to kind of nod off and just sit in the car for a bit, you could have the heat on without the engine running. Or when running errands in cold climates, if you didn't want to waste fuel at a rest stop, or if you wanted to keep the cabin warm just while you're running errands, if you're running into a place real quick, you could turn the car off, put on the rest mode, and the car would stay warm while you went inside for a few minutes, came back out, and it's still warm. Or if there's someone waiting in the car, it would also help keep the cabin warm. So another interesting control in here is the console, in the center console next to the gear shift is a switch marked W and S. You can choose between W for winter and S for summer. So summer would basically start your car in first gear, while winter would start the car in second gear. So that would help reduce slipping in more slippery conditions. Next to the control for the windows is a child lock. And an interesting thing there is that it has a little image of a child when you flip it over from the white dot or to the child when it's locked for children. The cup holder in the center console is an interesting gadget. It pops up and reveals a second cup holder, but mine's broken. It actually broke while cleaning this car for the auction. And it does function. It's very flimsy and frequently would break. So it wasn't really that useful, but it was somewhat useful. Don't worry though, there are more cup holders. One nuance is that there's actually 2 more cup holders in the glove box. And I don't know if Mercedes is trying to say something about how smooth their ride is, or if these are meant to only be used if you're stopped and eating in the car with the glove box open, have your drinks just sitting there. So another interesting gadget is that when you go to open the hood and lift the hood a bit, a release lever will pop out and make it easy for you to open the hood. So there's no fiddling around, searching up underneath the hood to find a lever. In the gauge cluster, you've got your standard old school analog gauges, but a display in the middle will take you through various different screens, and it will tell you what's playing on the radio and your trip economy and fuel economy, and trip computer was in there. And it was, an early attempt, but it was actually pretty good. There was actually an impressive amount of information in there, I thought. Another couple minor nuances in the gauge cluster is that, honestly, the giant traction control warning. When you turn the traction control off and that big orange triangle comes up there with the exclamation point, it is humongous. Newer cars, not quite as big. It also had really big turn signal lights for some reason. These big green turn signals arrows were humongous on this dash for some reason. Maybe their clientele was older and they couldn't see as well. I don't know. Another cool gadget inside is the SOS button. You have to press it, and then this little flap flips down and reveals a large red button, just like you're about to fire a missile on a fighter jet. And a couple of neat nuances is that with the reverse gear, when you have the wipers on, it will automatically engage the rear wiper when you put it in reverse without having to press the button on the dash. So even if your rear wiper's off, if you have your front wipers on and you put the car in reverse, your rear wiper will start going. So that's so you can see behind you while you're reversing in the rain. And the rear wiper has a washer nozzle, but mine is missing on the cap, which kind of creates a James Bond style rear wiper squirter. And so you can squirt the person behind you if they honk at you or anything like that. The other thing while you're reversing is if you have the mirror lever selected to the right mirror, then you can it will dip the right mirror so that you can see when you're pulling up on a curb, which is handy if you're parallel parking. And so if the mirror adjustment lever is on the right mirror, it will dip, and if it's not, then it won't dip. So you don't have to engage that all the time, and it's a kind of a neat little nuance there. The other nuanced button is the fishhook button on the dash. It's like, what's going on here? Are we trying to catch the car? But no, it's actually, it can only be activated while the car is off, because the purpose is to disable the alarm while the car is being towed. This car originally came with a phone that was built into the center console as well. You'd lift the center console lid, and there was a Mercedes-Benz branded cellular telephone, and it was kind of a big deal to talk on the phone while you're in the car back in 2000. And there was even the dial pad on the center radio screen, but this car no longer has one. And then if you open up the second level of the center console, there's a larger area that has cooled or heated, really depending on what your HVAC. It's a cooled and heated, climate controlled center console storage. So it's a nice and cool. You can put your food in there, your chocolate. That's what I always heard the story was, that German executives wanted their chocolate to stay cool while they're in the car. We can move into the back now. So as we move into the back, the first thing you notice again is that the doors are very solid. And another nuance back here is that you have ashtrays, of course, for the kids. But no, in German you had, in Germany you had people that would smoke back then, and you had to have their ashtrays in the back. So there's just as many ashtrays back here as there are cup holders. One cool gadget is that the rear seats have a special lever that lifts them up so they can fold so that the top part can fold completely flat. The bottoms will lift up. The battery is also located under the rear seat. One nuance is that there's a place for the headrest to go when the seats are fully folded. So we move on to the cargo area, and it's worth noting that this cargo space is enormous. This rear cargo space is absolutely huge. It's cavernous. It rivals modern midsize SUVs with 69 cubic feet of storage space. Also in the cargo area, it's worth pointing out that a CD changer and first aid kit are hidden under the carpeted Mercedes-Benz lid. You just push down the lever on top and you open it, and there's a six disc CD changer in there, so you can listen to all your tunes as they fit on 6 CDs. And but you have to park to change the CD. So if you're listening to something else, then you got to get out and change the CD manually in the trunk or in the cargo area. So the most exciting thing in the cargo area is the third row. And from the rear floor folds up a rear-facing bench seat third row. So there was 2 extra seats back here. This kind of seat was very common on wagons in the 70s and 80s, but it really started to die out in the 90s. And Mercedes held out even beyond Volvo. They had one in their wagon for a bit, in their V70. Even Tesla Model S, which was a sedan, but actually had jump seats in the back at the very beginning. I don't believe they have it anymore. And as of 2023, the very last year of the E-Class, that's the last car that I know of, at least in the US market, with a rear-facing third row. So Mercedes held out all these years, and get them while they're still available. The wagon had one other suspension difference from the sedan, as it came with a self-leveling rear suspension. So when you had your kids or cargo in the back, the car would still ride at the same height. And it worked through the way of a pneumatic shock that had accumulators. They used the power steering fluid, and it's a special hydraulic oil, and so it would fill that, and the shocks would ride stiffer and the car would ride higher. There are cup holders in the third row. These are honestly one of the coolest and most fragile gadgets in the car. So look at that mechanism. I mean, just the hinges and everything and the way they fold up, it's really cool. I'm surprised there weren't any ashtrays, however, in the third row. There's also a 12-volt outlet back here, which was kind of cool, kind of forward thinking at the time. Maybe if you took your family camping or you had a road trip and you needed a DVD player in the back, it was cool to have that 12-volt outlet in the cargo area. The parcel cover extends to cover your packages. And one cool thing is that it automatically pops up when you open the rear tailgate. Also, the rear tailgate is soft closing, so you just touch it down, let it set down gently, and then it'll pull itself shut. There's a dog net in addition to the parcel cover, and it has even a second location, so you can put the dog net all the way up even if all the seats are down. So you put the seats down and then you can put the dog net up right behind the front seats, or if the seats are up in the back, then you can put the dog net up just in the cargo area. So if you have multiple dogs or one very large dog that just needs some extra space, you can put the all the seats down and still have the dog net. All right, driving the S210 E320 4MATIC. So I've owned this car about 2 years now, and it's been super reliable. It drives very cushy, but not quite old Buick or Cadillac level of cushiness. It's very much like driving a couch or recliner. It's slow. You can definitely feel the weight of the car, but I would say that power is adequate, and so is braking. I'll say it kind of does hide the rear end size by having the same wheelbase as the sedan. And unless you're in a parking lot backing up, you don't really notice the bigger rear end while you're driving. So it kind of feels like it just wants to cruise along, not be pushed too much into doing things it doesn't want to do. Steering is reasonably well weighted. Doesn't feel too light like some American land yachts. I love that this car is comfortable. It's really a lot more comfortable of a cruiser with sort of a floaty, relaxed capability. And lastly, the last thing I love about this car is just really a highway cruiser. You know, it's not tossable, it's not sporty, but it's just plain good, no drama. And I love how understated it is. You know, I get compliments from people and they would never guess it's over 20 years old, almost 25 years old, actually. And so it's very enjoyable to drive. Anyway, it's time to give this E320 a max score. And the max score here is 52 out of 100. Performance. The 3.2 V6 is adequate, but the car is generally slow unless you're really flooring it, especially with the all-wheel drive having more drivetrain losses, so it gets a 4 out of 10. Styling. It has modern classic lines, but still looks like an old Mercedes to most people, and many newer Mercedes are just nicer looking, so it gets a 5 out of 10. Daily. I did daily drive this for a while, and it is very great as a daily in terms of versatility, especially if you have kids or need to pick up stuff from the hardware store or go camping or put your dogs in the back, so it's super versatile. However, it does lack some modern comforts like Bluetooth and navigation and a screen and all that you kind of gotten used to. So it gets a 7 out of 10. Weekend. This isn't really special enough to take out just on the weekends, but it does get a few looks at car shows, especially if there's a Mercedes crowd there or it's a Mercedes specific show or a Mercedes event, so it gets a 3 out of 10. Value, these cars are available for a huge discount off the original MSRP and are basically fully depreciated at this point and maybe even increasing in value. And with that, very reliable drivetrain and all the features still working even after 20 plus years, then you have a great car for your money, so it gets a 7 out of 10. So the overall max score is 52 out of 100. Thanks for watching, and happy bidding.